Hey everyone, it's Michelle Metzner and welcome to my video on the 6 assumptions of andragogy and how they're going to apply to my final project. For my final project's professional development activity, I will follow the 6 andragogical assumptions to develop either a face-to-face or a synchronous online workshop in which participants will learn how to craft a cover letter that is tailored to a particular job opening. This will be a useful skill for my colleagues because it's going to help them gain new employment in the event of either self-initiated job or field change, or in the event of unexpected or planned job loss. Before we jump in, let me reiterate that I will be employing the andragogical approach to this workshop rather than the pedagogical approach. What's the difference? I'm glad you asked. In simple terms, pedagogy refers to the strategies used to teach children, while andragogy refers to the strategies used to teach adults. Andragogy includes 6 assumptions. That's going to be the learner's need to know, the learner's self-concept, the role of the learner's experience, the learner's readiness to know, the learner's orientation to learning, and the learner's motivation. So let's take a look at the 6 assumptions of andragogy and how each assumption can be applied to the cover letter workshop. So let's talk about assumption number 1, the need to know. Before adults will invest time and energy into learning a skill or concept, they first need to understand why they need to learn it in the first place. In other words, what's in it for me? What am I getting out of this experience? Sometimes the answer is because it's going to help learners pick up skills that will lead to employment, promotion, or a raise in pay. In other words, monetary rewards. At other times, though, the answer is going to be that acquiring the skill or knowledge will somehow improve the learner's lives in general, in non-monetary ways. Regardless of the answer, it's going to be up to the instructor to communicate to the learners why the skill or knowledge is important and how it's going to benefit them in the long run. One of the most effective ways an instructor can sway the learners is by highlighting real or simulated experiences that will allow them to identify areas in which they could improve and that keep them from being where they want to be in life. In demonstrating the need to know in the cover letter workshop that I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on what the learners will get out of the workshop. Crafting a cover letter is a very specific skill, and it's a necessary skill that's going to help learners find quality employment in the event that they either leave their current jobs voluntarily or experience involuntary job loss. So in other words, why do learners need to take this workshop? To help them improve their chances of getting an interview. So let's talk about assumption number 2, the learner's self-concept. Now, most adults have been out of school, whether it be high school or college, for quite some time. And in that time, they've come to see themselves as being independent and answering to maybe a select few people, like a spouse or a partner or a boss. When they get thrust back into a learning situation, whether by job mandate, where your job says, hey, you need to take this course, or by choice, they may revert to feeling the loss of control that they may have experienced while in school the first time. As a result, they may approach their new round of education in the same old way that they did many years before. In other words, they assume that the teacher will do all of the heavy lifting and will likely become dependent on the instructor for their own learning. This is called the assumption of dependency. When instructors subsequently attempt to teach adults as they would children, in other words, if they use pedagogy to try and teach adults, it creates a conflict in the learners between their self-concept of being independent and the teacher's treatment of them as dependent children. As a result, many adult learners end up leaving their programs in an attempt to extricate themselves from such a conflicted environment. To counter this, instructors need to design lessons that allow for a smooth psychological transition between the dependent student of yesterday and the independent learner of today. In Being mindful of the learner's self concept, I would use a hands off approach in order to give control of the cover letter workshop over to the learners and to put the burden of meaning making on them, not on me. It is not for me to impart, it's for them to create. Okay. This will involve a lot of group work, discussion, and negotiation on the learner's parts. These collaborative exercises show respect for learners' experiences and opinions, which go a long way towards supporting their view of themselves as adults with a lot to contribute. In being required to take on most of the control of the session, learners become more invested in the learning and are less likely to withdraw from the experience. They will also, this is very important, get practice in using the concepts presented in the workshop, which means that they'll be better able to apply what they've learned to real life tasks. So let's move on to assumption number 3, the role of the learner's experience. Unlike young learners, adult learners come to the party having lived. I mean, they come chock full of vast and varied experiences, which is great, but it poses a bit of a challenge for instructors. Because adult learners bring with them such a wide range of backgrounds, learning styles, motivations, and goals, adult education must employ customized learning plans and strategies. This means that the tools that instructors use must also differ from those that they use with younger students. Adult students tend to respond best to experiential techniques that acknowledge the experience they bring to the class. These activities are things like group discussions, simulations, labs, case studies, and peer review. Finally, it's important for adult educators to understand that if learners feel ignored or that their experience is not valued, they are likely to take it very personally. They take it as a rejection of both their experiences and of themselves as people. This could lead to their disengagement from the course, so be very mindful of that. With regard to the cover letter workshop, the role of the learner's experience is going to be front and center. Since they're crafting their own cover letters in response to job positions that they select themselves, the learners will have to use their own experiences, motivations, and goals to guide them through the process. Their experiences are not just acknowledged, they are necessary to the success of the workshop. This means that the learners are far more likely to engage in the activity than not. Assumption 4 is the readiness to learn. It's very challenging to teach someone a skill or a concept before they are mentally ready to understand it. This is what readiness to learn is all about. This assumption involves instructors laying the proper foundation for their adult learners to move from the mastery of one skill or concept to the learning of the next skill or concept. To do so, instructors must time the delivery of their lessons appropriately so that they're challenging learners, but not making it impossible for them to grasp some of the work. Some of the ways that instructors can facilitate the movement from one skill or concept to the next is by introducing performance models, career counseling, and simulations to the curriculum. Accommodating students' readiness to learn in the cover letter workshop will be fairly simple. After all, they are my colleagues who have gotten at least one job in their lives. They got the job they have now. However, most of them, they've been in the same academic positions for 20 years or more. And if they want to apply for new jobs, particularly if those jobs are in another career field, they're going to be rusty on how to apply for the position, but especially on how to apply for a non-academic position. To help learners, I plan to walk them through how to read and mark up a job posting so that they can use their notes on the posting as a guide for their own cover letter drafts. In modeling the technique, I can ensure that all of the learners are starting from the same foundation upon which they can apply their own experiences and ideas. All right, so let's talk about assumption 5, orientation to learning. Unlike young learners who tend to prefer to learn by subject area, adult learners tend to prefer a more task or problem oriented approach to learning. This gets back to assumption number one, the need to know. They want to know how learning this information will help them complete a task or otherwise deal with whatever problem life throws at them. Incorporating the orientation to learning assumption into the cover letter workshop is going to be fairly simple, since I'll be explaining from the start and throughout the workshop how learners can use the information in their own lives and how they can benefit by using the information should the need arise. Finally, we're at assumption 6, motivation. Unlike young learners who tend to be externally motivated by grades, adult learners tend to be more internally motivated by such things as wanting more satisfaction at work, a higher self-esteem, or even a better quality of life. Their pursuit of self-improvement, however, often hits some snags in the form of negative self-talk about their academic abilities, the lack of opportunities or resources to complete the work, not having enough time to do the work because of family or career demands, or even running into ineffective teaching strategies and approaches. What the snags boil down to basically, though, is I'm too old for this. I don't have time for this. This teacher doesn't know how to teach. So excuses, basically. To combat these excuses, this negative self-talk, in my workshop, I would remind learners why they're in the workshop to begin with, right? To improve their chances of getting hired so that they can continue providing for themselves and for their families, to improve the quality of their lives by either landing a higher paying job or simply leaving an unsatisfactory environment, even if they're taking a lateral move or even a step down. Essentially, I would remind them of what brought them to the workshop in the first place. Okay, so that brings us to the end of my rundown of the 6 assumptions of andragogy and how they'll apply to my cover letter workshop. Before we go, let's review the 6 assumptions of andragogy, which are the learner's need to know, the learner's self-concept, the role of learner's experience, the learner's readiness to learn, the learner's orientation to learning, and finally, the learner's motivation. As always, if you have any questions, please contact me at michelle.metzner@wright.edu, and I'll be happy to answer them. Until next time.